basically, the government, Keir Starmer came and told the farmers at the NFU conference that we would not have any tax rises. Right. And he sat in the hall in front of 3,000 NFU members and lied for an hour. And he's betrayed us. He's lied to the British public. And I don't own my farm. I'm only the caretaker.
To the point where farmers are at breaking point. That's really what this is all about. This is the last straw that has broke the camel's back, and things in agriculture have to change going forward.
Keir Starmer just got exposed with a leaked message about farmers' protests. Turns out farmers in North Wales have officially had it. They're calling the government's 20% inheritance tax on farms over $1 million a blatant assault on their family legacies. Because it seems like if you want to pass on your family farm to your kids, you should better hope you've got a spare million lying around, because the government's coming for its cut.
Everything we're doing it is for our kids. It's their future, and everything is just going against us. This inheritance tax it's ridiculous. It's the final straw.
I'm just so emotional. Why do we as farmers have to do this? We shouldn't,
This government needs to realise it's never been hungry since World War II. They're going to be hungry, because if they keep putting tax on the farmers, it's going to have a massive impact.
From 2026, farmers will be liable for inheritance tax at 20% on farms worth more than £1 million. They claim it will force many to sell up to pay the bill. In a country where 90% of land is farmed, Keir Starmer made no mention of them today.
Make no mistake, I will defend our decisions in the budget all day long. I will defend facing up to the harsh light of fiscal reality. I will defend the tough decisions that were necessary to stabilise our economy.
The farmers are not just fighting a tax, they're fighting for their futures, their children's futures, and the survival of an industry that feeds the nation. But sure, let's just leave them out in the cold while politicians scramble to cover their tracks.
So we would have to sell. I'm not sleeping. I feel like I've worked all my life and everything I've ever earned is going to have to go on tax because of my dad's age and because we're unlikely to be able to get life insurance for him. And if we can get life insurance, the premium will be horrendous.
The farmer protest just exposed a lot more than tax reforms. If Keir Starmer thought he could quietly walk away from this one, he's got another thing coming. And as for the government, well, they've just been handed a lesson in who really holds the power in this country.
This is the biggest protest the government has dealt with over domestic policy since the election. And farmers feel forgotten about and they feel ignored, and they're very, very angry about this inheritance tax policy that the government say will help them pay for crumbling services, but the strength of feeling here really, really high. We've got a couple of things going on today, Mike. First of all, there's a procession that starts at 11 a.m. round the corner from Westminster. We'll go to Westminster Square, and then we've also got the National Farmers Union lobbying politicians in person just round the corner.
Let's start from the beginning, because apparently, while farmers in the UK are storming Westminster, fighting for their livelihoods and the future of food production, Starmer's off on holiday, completely dodging the heat. Seriously, who needs to be there when you're busy basking in the Brazilian sun, right?
And if you've got a message for Keir Starmer, who isn't even bothering to be in London for this, to actually answer what the farmers might wish to ask him, if you could talk to him right now over in Brazil, what would you say?
Rural Britain matters, farming matters, feeding the country matters. This is too important to ignore.
Okay.
The upcoming anti-Starmer protests by farmers in London are set to make waves, with a host of notable figures like Jeremy Clarkson joining the ranks. But it's not just farmers taking a stand, it's everyone who eats because, well, food shortages could become a real issue if this government doesn't get its act together. The country already faces disruptions due to the Spanish floods, which wiped out crops, and now the government seems set to make it worse by attacking the very people who feed us. How exactly do they plan on rationing food? Given their track record with basic tasks, the prospect of them handling food security is laughable. If things don't change, food prices will soar and shortages will strike, creating a perfect storm for civil unrest. It's not just politics, it's about survival. The government better rethink its priorities, or they might just be feeding us chaos.
A bit of confusion over the figures and how many people this will affect. The NFU saying 70,000 farms could be affected, but the government actually saying only 500 estates a year will be affected by these changes. But one thing is certain, Mike, today it's going to be very, very tense outside the Palace of Westminster.
Now, the leaked message? Turns out Starmer was supposed to be the voice of the people. You know, the guy who's always in the fight for the working class. Instead, he's been caught telling his party something totally different behind closed doors. According to sources, his support for farmers was a bit too, politically calculated, more of a PR move than a genuine concern for their struggles. But hey, nothing screams trustworthy leader like leaving your people to fend for themselves while you sip cocktails abroad. And if you think the government's in the clear, think again. While they've been busy minimising the farmer backlash, claiming only a handful of estates will feel the pinch, the National Farmers Union, NFU, isn't buying it. In fact, they're calling out the misleading figures the government is pushing. You can't seriously believe that only 500 estates will be affected when thousands of farmers are mobilising against this tax. You know what they say, numbers don't lie, but politicians sure do.
I'm just so emotional. Why do we as farmers have to do this? We shouldn't, you know.
This government needs to realise it's never been hungry.
Oh look, the farmers have swapped their ploughs for placards. This time, they're in the picturesque town of Llandudno, North Wales, not just for the Welsh Labour Conference, but to send a clear message to the Prime Minister. Apparently, someone needs a lesson in reading the room, and it's not the farmers. So, here's the backdrop. Hundreds of farmers, fresh off a hard day's work, show up with a bone to pick over changes to inheritance tax. Yeah, turns out the government's not exactly scoring high in the let's be nice to farmers department. We just want some fair play, they say. And honestly, who can blame them? They're doing everything for their kids, their futures. Basically, it's all about passing down their farms without being hit with a crushing tax bill. But nope, here comes the government, making them jump through hoops just to keep the land in the family. One farmer couldn't help but express frustration. Why do we have to fight this? We shouldn't even be here. The government has no idea what it's like to be hungry. Sure, they might have skipped a meal or two, but they're not the ones out here on the land day after day. Oh, and did I mention? According to the government, it's not even going to be that bad. They say it's only going to affect a small number of farms. But spoiler alert, farmers disagree. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer was confronted by pro-Palestinian activists during his visit to Glasgow on December 7, 2023. The activists, gathered at Glasgow Central Station, criticised him for his stance on the Israel-Gaza conflict, accusing him of facilitating genocide. This follows Starmer's opposition to a ceasefire in Gaza and his controversial comments on Israel's right to self-defense, which many interpreted as justifying the withholding of essential supplies to Palestinian civilians. Although he later clarified his position, the backlash has been significant, particularly within Muslim communities. During the protest, demonstrators held Palestinian flags and shouted phrases such as war criminal and child murderer. The confrontation continued outside the Crown Plaza Hotel, where Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar also faced criticism. 2 protesters were arrested and charged with disorder-related offences. The ongoing criticism highlights divisions within the Labour Party and public dissatisfaction with its approach to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Jeremy Clarkson turned around to the crowd yesterday and asked them, he says, in front of a BBC interview, he says, and they were put in the same case as the government. He says, anyone here, that's not going to be affected with this, put your hand up. Nobody put their hand up.
Yeah.
So, it's wrong, it's not true, and tax is very complicated, as you know. But, I mean, the bottom line is, look.
So, Keir Starmer says the impact assessment of farms affected by the inheritance tax is small. But really, what does that even mean? Apparently, 73% of farms won't be impacted. Great. So the other 27% can just deal with it, right? That sounds like a solid plan, doesn't it? And just to add salt to the wound, Jeremy Clarkson asked a crowd of farmers if anyone wouldn't be affected. Guess what? No hands went up. Oops. So, clearly, they've obviously got it wrong. It's not just about taxes. This has been building up for years. With poor prices, climate change, disease and bureaucracy, farmers are barely keeping it together. And now the government's response? More pressure. If Starmer and his crew think this protest is going to stay quiet, they've got another thing coming. It's time to face the reality that this is a disaster in the making. Of course, the farmers weren't too thrilled about this and had a few words to say. One organiser called out the Prime Minister for being disrespectful. You know, the kind of disrespect you get when the Prime Minister literally runs out the back door like a rat when faced with real people's problems. Oh, the drama. And now, for the grand finale, the farmers aren't backing down. Oh no, they're planning a nationwide strike. No, really. Next week, they're going to withhold meat and crops from supermarkets. Talk about taking matters into their own hands. And guess what? If the government still doesn't listen, they're prepared to take things even further. Let's just say the plot thickens. So, what's next in this riveting saga? Well, the farmers are serious. They'll be protesting in London next Tuesday, and if things don't change, this could be just the beginning.
There are already, ongoing battles with, Keir Starmer and with the Chancellor Rachel Reeves over how many farms are going to be hit and whether or not there's any possibility that the government is going to back down. What do you make of the protests, and do you think they will actually make any difference?
The voice of the Countryside Alliance, a group that's just thrilled about current government policies on family farms. You know, that tiny little issue of inheritance tax now being slapped on farms worth over £1 million. Yeah, no biggie. Just a 20% tax for any family farm that's, actually worth something. Let's talk about politics now. Turns out Labour MPs are caught in a tough spot. They've got those rural constituencies to worry about, the very ones hit hardest by this tax. But what are they doing about it? Well, some are quietly hoping the whole issue just goes away, like Baroness Malou, thank goodness for her, are willing to speak out. Bless her soul for trying to make a fuss. But here's the reality check. If Labour MPs want to survive this disaster, they'd better start raising their voices for the rural folks who voted them in. Otherwise, they might just get swept up in this growing storm. So, yeah, hang tight, folks. This protest saga is far from over. Will Keir Starmer and his merry band of MPs finally figure out what side they're bread buttered on? Or will farmers just keep revving up those tractors? Stay tuned.